David, welcome back to the People Quotient Podcast. This is we're getting close to the end of our series. I'm starting to get more and more out of our conversations because I'm worried that we will run out of time and there's still more to be shared by you. So we'll do our best to capture everything we can in the next little bit. But for a recap, and for those who are listening, who've been following us, and those who haven't and are dialing in for the first time, in the previous several conversations we've had in this leadership series, we've talked about high-performing teams. We've talked about peak-performing individuals. We've also talked about leadership and what does it mean? What does it mean to be a leader? How leaders differentiate themselves as an individual. I think in this episode, the focus is how do we bring it all together, right? So we're going to bring all the different parts of it. Specifically, when you think about a leader bringing in a peak-performing individuals or managing them or building a high-performing teams, how do they do it? Like what differentiates leaders and teams that excel, that win, that going back to our first conversation, at the top of the Lencioni pyramid consistently and constantly, versus those who struggle to get there. So maybe we start there, David, as to when you think about great leaders who brought it all together repeatedly over and over again with a lot of success, how do they do it?
Well, nice to be back, first of all, Rohit, and thank you for asking me such an easy question to get us going.
You're going to get that somewhere.
Absolutely. As I reflect back on the people, the leaders that I've worked with, and the series of conversations that you and I've had so far, I think the thing that strikes me the most is the notion and the actuality of a sense of purpose. I think this is by far the thing that sits right at the heart of a leader's identikit, of a great leader's identikit. I think other things spin around that, Rohit, but I think the biggest thing for me is the notion of a sense of purpose. Why? We've talked before about it's hard to lead if nobody is following. So the notion of creating a followership is absolutely paramount. How do you do that? It's hard to do that if you don't know where you're going. People need to know where they're following you to and why that matters, why that's important to you, and why should it be important to them, and how on the back of that, how in harmony with that, are they enabled to create their own sense of purpose as well as sharing in your leadership sense of purpose. And I think that's important for the leader. It's important for the followership. It's also a trait that I see very much being present in high-performing individuals. People at peak performance, amongst a myriad of things, will tend to have a clearly defined sense of purpose. What am I doing and why? Who do I want to be and why? What's important and why? And so on. So this is where we start to see the seemingly disparate things that we've explored together really starting to come together. What's the glue that holds these various pieces together? So for me, the notion of a sense of purpose and the renewal of that, right, Rohit? This is not a once in a lifetime, I've got my sense of purpose, boom, the book's closed, I'm done. It's checking in. Is that sense of purpose still true for me today as it was at this time last year?
Yeah.
And if not, how has my experience in life over that intervening year reshaped that sense of purpose? And if the sense of purpose does remain the same, am I still pursuing it? I always call them my vehicles. Are the vehicles that I'm using in order to live and deliver that sense of purpose still the right vehicles? So you're questioning on two levels. Is the sense of purpose still right? Yes or no? And even if it's yes, is the way that I'm delivering it, or the vehicles through which I'm living it, still the right set of vehicles? Or do I need to make a change at that level?
Yeah, I think it reminds me of the conversation we had in the previous episode, which is with Jabi Alonso. Like you sort of mentioned, there was very clear sense of purpose. Now, we were talking about him as a leader, but you'd also mentioned that even in his athletic days, that's exactly what he had. And then even now, he's beyond the coach, which has allowed him to be as great as he has become, having led Leverkusen to their first title in I don't even know how many years. And so to me, that was an example that came to mind. But also the concept that you're describing, which is a sense of purpose, is I often, when I talk to business leaders and people and boards and private equity or, in public sector even, I often talk about the concept of what are you solving for, right? And I think what you're saying is two parts, is what and how. That clarity is key. But the thing that I really I'm thinking about as reflecting on as you're saying it is that changes with time, whether you're within a project, within a company, at a personal level, in professional sports, public sector, private sector. You got to keep evaluating what are you solving for. And often when people don't know the mega picture of what might they be solving for, I sort of say, what are you solving for today? Right. And sort of break it down into bite-sized pieces, because when you say a sense of purpose, especially at that scale, it can be overwhelming, and it gets overwhelming for me sometimes, more times than I'd like to want it to be. But I think what you're getting at is by having that clarity is what just allows leaders to bring it all together. And then others who are following can see that clarity, and then they know whatever it is that they're doing in their tasks, how is that feeding that end product? Right? Am I on the same wavelength, or have I missed the mark in the way you were trying to describe sense of purpose?
No, I think you've got it. And I think, when you first embark on the journey, whether it's very early in your career or whether you come to this way of thinking later in your career, it can be a bit overwhelming, right? Because you're thinking about, I have limited time here as a human, right? Forget my role. But just as a human, I have limited time here. What do I want to do with that time? That's a big question, right? So the initial investment in really thinking that through and getting support to help you think that through is a big task. And and it is daunting. And for many people, even if they have the realization that this is a really worthwhile piece of thinking to do, they're scared away by the seeming enormity of it. And so they never get around to doing it. But for those that do, I would say really think of it as an investment. And like any really good investment, it has payoff. And in fact, it has ongoing payoff. So it's worth the initial investment, because then the month to month, the quarter to quarter, the day to day, as you were referring to, the choices and decisions that face us as leaders somehow become much easier. They become much clearer, because you're solving through the lens of that sense of purpose. It becomes your reference point to choices and decisions that are going to come at you thick and fast. And so it becomes that North Star, if you like, that helps you make the right choices for you in pursuit of that sense of purpose. So it's a whole of life thing, but working back from it, you're able to make sense of things on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter, year-to-year basis.
Yeah. Well, one question that comes to mind, David, and this is something, and the reason I bring it up is it makes sense that when a leader has a sense of purpose, and then they can then, galvanize teams around them to be able to deliver against that sense of purpose. But a lot of people listening in was like, well, how do I even find my sense of purpose? Right? Because we're talking through the lens of, in my mind, I often go to the business world, and I know you've worked with business politicians, athletes, all at a very elite level. How did they find, or how does one go about finding that sense of purpose and knowing that is the sense of purpose? Because it took me 4 decades, maybe 4.5 decades, to get to, where we are now in this podcast and some of the other work that I'm doing on people specific topics. But that's a almost half a lifetime, should I have a 2x lifetime. So the question for you is, how does one get to a sense of purpose? And then how does one know that that's the answer?
So on the first question, how do you get to your sense of purpose? Unless you are a very, very rare and truly exceptional individual, it's a very difficult journey to make on your own. I know very, very few people who've made any parts, let alone the entire journey, on their own. I think you need support in order to do that. Because there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of thoughts, there's a lot of personal history to get out of your head to process, to think through, to make sense of, to pull meaning from in order to project. What does this tell me about who I am, about what's important to me? And that's your starting point to say, this is who I am today, made up of all these things, current and past. Who do I want to be tomorrow?
Yeah.
Right? So you've got to create a foundation stone first on which to build that future looking, that evolving sense of purpose. And it's really, really difficult to do that on your own. So I would say step number one is engage with a mentor, a coach, whatever title you want to give to the person or persons who are going to help you on the journey. And remember, you're investing in yourself, so that you make yourself the best version of yourself that you can be. So it's worthwhile doing it, and it's worthwhile doing it early. It's a function of leadership. It's not necessarily a function of being a leader. And remember what we said before, leadership can come from anywhere. So don't wait until the day that you are occupying a role that happens to make you a leader. Demonstrate your own leadership early to say, I'm embarking on this journey, regardless of where life takes me, because I think this is a worthwhile thing to do. And I think you'll find, coincidentally, that your journey of being a leader will start earlier, because there's something magnetic about someone who is demonstrating and speaking and living a sense of purpose. So I think your experience of being a leader will start earlier, and you'll get off to a much better start than if you hadn't embarked on this process.
One question I had for you, because when you're early in your career, like when I was in my 20s, I don't have enough experience. I'm still sort of figuring things out. And I heard this a lot, and I was always genuinely in awe and quite frankly jealous of people who had figured it out. They'd found their sense of purpose. Even now today, when I meet 20-year-olds who figured it out, I'm like, man, that is amazing. Like, I'm genuinely like in awe that how did you get there? But reflecting on it, retrospectively, when I look back on my 20s, and could I have figured it out? One thing and could I have been where I am now back then without the titles that you're referring to, without the leadership roles, but demonstrating leadership? And I think I could have, but if I had sort of taken away the word purpose and replaced it with passion. And the reason I say that is, I was always passionate about the people side of everything, in all parts of life. And I think, but back then I didn't know that would become my purpose. So for those who are early in their careers, whether they're pursuing sports, music, arts, whatever it is that they're doing in their lifetime, is that the right way for somebody listening to this who's like, well, I'm not quite there yet, David. I'm trying to get my first job. I'm still in uni. I just graduated. I've got my first job. Like, I don't know what my purpose is yet, because how would I know? Would you say that then follow your passion if you're early in your career, in your life, and then purpose would come? Or is there a better way to, short circuit this journey to finding that purpose?
Yeah, potentially it's a bit of both, Rohit, right? So I think early on, there's certainly no harm in following your passion, right? And the challenge for some people, right, is that what is my passion? I don't know, right? Yeah. So there's always that first hurdle. Is it, I don't know what my purpose is. I like a few things, but I'm not really passionate about anything. For some people, that's their first hurdle. There's always a first hurdle, right? But even if we think about the passion, a lot of the conversations that I've had with leaders, with emerging leaders throughout my career, has been around exploring the passion itself. What do I mean by that? So you may have a particular passion for something, but that something may not be a career-defining thing, or you may not want that passion, playing the violin, I don't know, to be your career, but you've still got a passion for it, right?
Yeah.
So then it becomes super powerful to unpick Why are you passionate about that thing? What is it about that that excites you, that fulfills you, that puts a smile on your face, that makes you feel good? And you can unpick passion into a series of things about it that make it occupy that role in your mind or in your heart. Those things that you unpick can be replicated, right? So if these are the things that contribute to that headline passion, where else can I get the satisfaction from those sorts of things? And that's an example of the start of your journey to realizing what might be my sense of purpose, what might be my thing, what's the thing that's going to excite and inspire and sustain me, not just for now, but on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and I do this leadership awareness exercise with a lot of emerging leaders, and a lot of what you're describing is inside it as well, because the idea is to extract the attributes, the ingredients that make up for whatever it is that excites you. And I actually have them do the flip of it, is also write down things that completely just despise, because sometimes the negative, at a minimum, it keeps you away from things, but at best, it will actually pull you towards the right direction, because you're like, what's the opposite of that? I think to your point then, and that's usually helpful in the emerging leaders group. And that's sort of anyone who's in their first or second job and looking to that managerial or next job or any profession, right? So looking for that attributes. And so what your counsel is, if you don't have a purpose, look at things that you're passionate about, but don't just look at what you're passionate about, look at what's driving behind it. And through that awareness building, you'll at least have the building blocks, and that'll lead you to your place of purpose eventually. Now, those who get there sooner, then you will have your leadership journey start sooner, and that'll give you one leg up, several legs up against other people who haven't quite gotten there yet. But throughout that process, you'll need a thought partner, because doing it alone is quite tricky. And I can attest to that firsthand. It took me 2 decades before I got there, and a lot of your help. But the point is that you've got to get that process, and the sooner you can get started, and the better it is.
The reason that great leaders, when they have those two things, don't lose people along the way is because they have an inspiring ability to be able to communicate that sense of purpose.
Subscribe to the People Quotient channel, where leadership meets action. Powerful conversations with practical insights that you can use right now. See you in the next episode.